in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, the protest that followed, the Congresswoman actually has introduced legislation, the George Floyd Police Reforming Act of 2020, which passed the House on Friday. Stephen, could you tell us a little bit about what that aims to do and how effective it might be?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sylvester. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act of 2020 is a reform bill that has passed the House. And what it does, many things, including at the top, to change the criminal intent in a police brutality prosecution from one of willfulness to one of recklessness. Second, it limits qualified immunity for police officers. It authorizes the Department of Justice to issue subpoenas to law enforcement. It creates a national registry of police officers so that police officers who have records of misconduct can't just slip off to another department and get hired without any responsibility for their past. It prohibits profiling, pretextual arrests, which have plagued people of color and particularly Black men. It also requires certain reporting and training in bias, and it emphasizes the need for police cameras to be turned on all the time.
So it aims to sort of make police more accountable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what we're really talking about here is the issue of race. And Steve, those things that the Police Reform Act tried to do, accountability, we have laws already, that are supposed on the books. I mean, from Civil Rights Act, school desegregation. There's always, laws are only as good as the people who enforce them. How do we change, Steve? What we're talking about is changing the culture of policing. How do we do that? Steve?
I think the elements of the reform bill that Congresswoman Bass has introduced are absolutely essential. I would suggest that they are absolutely necessary, but not sufficient, because police brutality is just the tip of the iceberg of white supremacist devaluation of Black lives, of all BIPOC communities. And so it's not just bad cops or a broken system. I would suggest that the criminal system and policing are not broken, with roots in enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act, Black codes, Jim Crow, lynching, and now mass incarceration. I think they're working very well to their intended purpose of protecting white privilege and oppressing people of color, especially African Americans, and particularly Black men, through a campaign of terror that has been ongoing for a very, very long time. There are many good police officers. It's the system. It's the system that trains incoming officers in warrior policing, to be on guard all the time, to kill out of fear of being killed, and responding with conditions response of violence. If I can just speak to Philando Castillo's situation, he is busted for a broken taillight. And the officer, Geronimo, I think his name is Yanez, confronts him, and Mr. Castillo says, "I have a registered weapon," and his girlfriend implores the officer not to shoot him. And we witnessed him being shot 7 times to death over essentially a driving while black offense. What people don't know is the background on the training of that officer. He was trained in part by a Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a former Army Ranger. And he founded and runs an organization called the Killology Institute, which you really couldn't make up if you tried. This is a person who trains thousands of police officers, has something like 200 training dates a year on his calendar. And he said, and I quote him, "If you are prepared killing is just not that big a deal. And he tells his classes that if they are not prepared to kill, they should not become police officers. So the culture that allows for this stop and killing, and then under these historic and awful qualified immunity laws that allow the officer to be acquitted. Officer Yunez was acquitted of all charges.